Now this was the first that started the chain reaction. So Abu Talib passed away in Rajab. Now 2 months later, in the month of Ramadan, who passes away? Khadija radiallahu anha. The Prophet ﷺ, the love of his wife, the mother of the believers, she passes away. The Prophet ﷺ and Khadija radiallahu anha had been married for about 25 years. Much prior to him even becoming a prophet. So you can imagine what kind of relationship they shared. For 25 years they were married. Through the youth of the Prophet ﷺ up till now. So now the Prophet ﷺ, we said, is 50 years old. So Khadija would be about 65 years old. And Khadija radiallahu anha was really his emotional support. Abu Talib was his physical support. He was his insurance. In the Meccan society, the way things would work is that clans would openly declare immunity or protection for an individual. And this was something the Prophet ﷺ didn't need until he became a prophet, so people had an issue with it. And now they're debating, should we kill Rasulullah? Should we harm Rasulullah? So Abu Talib and his clan came out and gave him physical protection. So if you hurt this man, then our entire clan is going to come after you. So now think about that. First, Abu Talib is now gone. So that immunity, that insurance is gone with it. Now the comfort of his home, where he would come to find comfort when he was distressed. When the Prophet ﷺ first saw Jibreel, he got the first revelation. Who did he run to? To Khadija. And there is a very beautiful narration from the Messenger ﷺ where he talks about Khadija. He says what? آمنت بي حين كفر بي الناس. She believed in me when everyone else disbelieved in me. And when we were going through this in our classes with the students, Khadija believed in the Messenger when he didn't even believe in himself. When the Prophet ﷺ was thinking, what I see was right? When he was debating on what he saw was right, Khadija affirmed it. Khadija believed before any other believer. She was on the forefront. وَصَدَّقَتْنِي حِينَ كَذَّبَنِي النَّاسِ. And she embraced Islam when people disbelieved in me. When people denied me, she was on the forefront. وَأَشْرَكَتْنِي فِي مَالِهَا حِينَ حَرَمَنِ النَّاسِ. And she helped me and comforted me in the person and the wealth that she had when there was no one else to lend me a helping hand. وَرَزَقَنِ اللَّهُ وَلَدَهَا. And she was the only one that I had children with. So there's a very, very special relationship that the Messenger ﷺ has with Khadija radiallahu anha. And now, 2 months after losing his uncle, the Prophet ﷺ loses Khadija radiallahu anha. So now you have no protection physically, and you have no support emotionally. 2 major losses have been dealt to the Messenger ﷺ. But that's not even the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that the da'wah in Mecca isn't doing so well. People aren't really converting anymore. It's just talk about killing the Messenger ﷺ. We're going to be done with this. We need to take care of this and be done now. Abu Talib is gone. Khadija radiallahu anha is gone. Let's be over with this. It's been 10 years. It was a good run. It's been 10 years. Let's finish it now. So Mecca is at an all-time low in terms of where it's going with its da'wah. So the Prophet ﷺ decides that since no one is believing in Mecca, we're going to take things outside of Mecca and go to a different city. Right? Which city does he go to? The city of Taif. Right? And it made sense, the city of Taif, he goes to because the Prophet ﷺ had grown up with Banu Sa'ad, right? With Halima Sa'adiyah from those people, and they were settled near the city of Taif. And the city of Taif was no random city. The city of Taif was one of the most beautiful cities in that area, second only to Mecca. Medina was a city of farmers. It wasn't really like a big deal. Now Medina is one of the most beautiful cities that we have, but at that time, Medina was a city of farmers. Whereas Taif was an economic hub and a religious hub. Taif was a big deal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what I was able to read is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks about Al-Qaryatayn Azim, the 2 major cities, He's talking about Mecca and what? And Taif. So it's a beautiful city. They had a great economic system, a great religious system. It was a thriving community. So the Prophet ﷺ decides that let's go and give them da'wah. Let's go to them and talk to them and see if they can respond to the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another big thing was that Ta'if was house to one of the big idols that we hear about. Ta'if was a home to the idol of Al-Lat. We've heard of Al-Lat, right? Al-Lat and Al-Uzza. So they had their shrine for Al-Lat over there. So people would visit Ta'if to go and give their homage to Al-Lat. Whereas what was the idol of Mecca? The big one, the big idol. Hubal. Hubal was the big idol that stood in Mecca. So when you would come, you would say, oh, Mecca is house to Hubal. And Ta'if is house to Al-Lat. So they were big religious centers as well. So there's lots of people coming in and out of Ta'if. So the Prophet ﷺ decides to take his message there. He goes and meets with 3 leaders. And he gives them the message. He has a discussion with them. And it didn't go really well at all. And they were very disrespectful and they were rude to the Messenger ﷺ. Right? They said, we're going to come and rip the covers of the Kaaba. If you are a prophet, I don't want to talk to you. If you're a liar, I don't want to talk to a liar. So they tried to make a joke out of it. They tried to make a joke out of this meeting. Even though the Messenger ﷺ came and gave them a very good offering. The Prophet ﷺ was not bothered by this. Fine, if the leaders don't want to, I'm going to go out in the streets and give da'wah. And really you recognize that the Prophet ﷺ's worry was not about fame, power, or people accepting him really. The Prophet ﷺ was worried about what? People believing in La ilaha illallah. The leaders didn't believe, fine, I'll go out in the street and give da'wah. This was the Prophet ﷺ. And he's lost 2 of the pillars of his life, yet he's still standing in the streets of Ta'if calling people to La ilaha illallah. It's really an amazing thing to think about. That when we are struck by calamity or disaster in our homes, how do we react? Do we forget about Allah in those situations? When someone in our family passes away, and not anyone, a close relative of ours, what is our reaction to that? Do we forego our obligations to Allah in that process? Do we forget about coming to the masjid? Do we forget about praying our salawat? Do we forget about making dhikr to Allah? Because Allah inflicted us with some kind of disaster, whereas here the disaster is going to get worse. But it's already pretty bad. The Prophet ﷺ has lost 2 major pillars, not only for himself, but his protection also is gone with it. So it's going to affect the da'wah. But here he is being denied by the leaders of Ta'if, standing in the streets giving da'wah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So what happens is that the leaders, they decide to kick the Messenger ﷺ out of their city. So it's not that the leaders went and they did what they did to him. They sent the lower part of society, right? Like the riffraffs, the lower part of society, to go and kick this man out of our city. He's out here preaching La ilaha illallah, get him out. We don't want him here. So the people decided to take stones and rocks and they threw it at the Messenger ﷺ to kind of, like, it's a very barbaric way of asking someone to leave. And it says that they chased him almost 2 to 3 miles out of the city as they threw rocks and stones. And who was with the Messenger ﷺ? Zayd bin Haritha, his freed slave, was with him as well, and he's trying to defend and cover the Messenger ﷺ. But really, you think about it, sometimes we get offended if we don't get an opportunity to speak, or we don't get an opportunity to lead the salah or give the khutbah. We get very offended, right? That we weren't giving nice treatment in our own masjid, or someone didn't say salam to me. We get really touchy-feely about these things. Here's the messenger being driven out of a city he went to Ta'if. And the reason he went to Ta'if was because his own homeland, there was nothing left there. Now he's in a foreign city. He's in a city outside of his home, just to spread the message of La ilaha illallah. And people are still, he's running, imagine, the Messenger ﷺ is running out of the city because people are stoning him. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet ﷺ makes it out of the city, 2 to 3 miles or so. And at this point he's very profusely bleeding. His legs are bleeding, his sandals are oozing out blood when he steps. Zayd bin Haritha's head is injured because he's trying to defend the Messenger ﷺ, that his head is bleeding also. So it was just a mess. So the Messenger ﷺ reaches to a point where there's an orchard and it belongs to the two sons of Rabi'ah, which is a big leader of Mecca. So they see the Messenger ﷺ in the state that he's in, and they know, obviously he is from their tribe. So they say, you know what, you can come and stay in our orchard. They had a little garden. So the Prophet ﷺ and Zayd rest there, and they decide to send him some grapes. They felt bad for the Messenger ﷺ. But I say this because I want us to feel bad as well. When we think our life is too difficult to connect with Allah, think about the Messenger ﷺ. And this is all happening in a span of what? The Prophet ﷺ was in Ta'if in Shawwal. Khadija passed away 1 week. When? We said Ramadan. Abu Talib passed away when? Rajab. So it's just a very short period of time. For us, these 3 months pass so quickly. We have this cycle of life that we're going through. The Prophet ﷺ is being hammered, one test after another. And here he is now in this orchard, bleeding. Can he go back to Ta'if? Not really. Should he go back to Mecca? That's the reason he left. It's very at an all-time low. So now the Prophet ﷺ is left to nowhere. Anyway, so those two brothers, they send the Prophet ﷺ a plate of grapes. They felt bad for him to give him some food. So does anybody know the slave who brought the grapes? What was his name? I really want to mention this story because I think it's amazing. So the name of the slave was Addas. And I want everyone to remember this name. So Addas is a slave. For our extensive purposes in this story, a random person. A random person. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ is bleeding, he needs somewhere to rest. The two sons of Rabi'ah feel bad, they send him a plate of grapes. So at this point, Addas is not supposed to be important in this story. He's really a nobody at this point. But anyway, Addas brings him a plate. And I think it's remarkable that Prophet ﷺ takes a grape and he still remembers to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right? He sits down and he nicely eats grapes. When we're really bothered, even in the masjid events, when we're hungry after a long lecture, we're running to the food. We're running to the food. We don't forget to say Bismillah. We're trying to make sure that I get more chicken pieces in my plate. It's a reality. The Prophet ﷺ here is bleeding after being discarded by a community, both of his cities. And someone felt pity on him to send him a plate of grapes. Yet the Messenger ﷺ is sitting there saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim while he eats grapes with the most adab, with the most respect. It blows my mind really. Anyway, so Addas says that he was very shocked that the Prophet ﷺ said Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So he said, I've never heard anyone say something like this. No one says a statement or phrase the way you did. So the Prophet ﷺ now decides, let me chat with Addas. Does it look like a time where he sits down and has a chat with Addas, this random slave? But the Prophet ﷺ's person or being was really someone we cannot understand. When we're in grief, sorrow, we're angry, do we want to talk to people? No, because what's going to come out is not going to please them. When we are angry and our children come and say something simple, we lash out. Why? Because we are angry. When we're going through a difficult period, when someone wants to come and talk to us about something else, we don't want to talk to them. Keep in mind the steps that the Prophet ﷺ has been through to get here. So he says, Addas, come tell me about yourself. Prophet ﷺ's body bleeding. Someone has, out of pity, offered him grapes, and he says, Addas, come and tell me who you are. I want to know about you. So Addas says that I am a Christian. And I'm from the city of Nineveh. What do we know about that city? That's where Prophet Yunus ﷺ was. And the Prophet ﷺ knew that. So the Prophet ﷺ says that, oh, the city where Yunus, the son of Metta, was from, right? So Addas was mind blown. It's like, how do you even know that? I mean, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ is having this conversation and trying to have some da'wah in the process is just ridiculous to me. The Prophet ﷺ is emotionally, physically, spiritually at an all-time low. He is. He has the time to talk with Addas and say, oh yeah, isn't that where Yunus is from? So now Addas is so excited. How do you know who this is? So he says that Yunus was a prophet. And he is my brother, and I am also a prophet. So Addas now, he begins kissing Rasulullah's hands and feet. Of course, because Addas now believes that the Prophet ﷺ is a messenger. And now the sons of Rabi'a are saying, what are you doing? We just sent you to give the grapes. Why are you kissing his hands and feet? But again, that conversation with Addas is more beloved to the Messenger ﷺ. Why? Because one more person was exposed to the message, to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Really. And it is beyond remarkable to me, that conversation started by him sitting and saying Bismillah before he eats. Some things that we don't think are important, but to the Messenger ﷺ, they are important. Anyway, as we come to a close, the Prophet ﷺ made a dua at the time of Ta'if. Right? And I want to quickly go through a piece of this dua to really tell us what the Prophet said. So the Prophet